Thank you for joining us for Pronouns and More. This is Joanne Johnston, CEO of the Clark County Association of Realtors in Vancouver, Washington. One of our primary goals is to help answer the question why pronouns matter. Pronouns, like personal names, are connected to a person's identity. Just as we can show respect by calling others by their correct names, we can show respect by using the correct pronouns. Using the wrong pronoun can make a person feel uncomfortable and possibly invalidated or alienated. As a realtor, what does this also look like on paperwork when you're working within a transaction? Well, with us today, we have James Barnes. He's a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway and also a member of our diversity committee. James is excited to bring a sense of knowledge to what can feel like a very confusing topic. James?
Thank you. So, as she said, my name is James. Just to go over introductions real quick. I am a husband, a dad. I also love cooking and fitness, jazz, and a good book. And I also happen to be a realtor. The reason I got into real estate was because my wife and I just had our first child, and we were wanting to get the backyard, the picket fence, all of the cliches. And she had bought the house before we'd gotten together, so we were listing her home and we were going to be buying our home together. And basically from the very beginning to the very end of the transaction, I had immense anxiety. I was stressing whether it was getting in touch with the lender, title asking questions, even at the very beginning of touring homes. And I would have all of this stress about going into the homes or if the sellers found out who was touring their home. And the reason that I had all of this anxiety was because I am trans. And so as a trans individual, now I present male. And if you saw my name, everything looks male. But if you were to look on my social media, you would quickly realize that I'm in the LGBTQ community. And what I was terrified is that people would have, see my name, or the lender would see my previous name, my dead name, and we'll go over that in a bit. And I'd be outed, and I didn't know what my rights were, legally, federally, state, locally. I didn't know where I stood, and I did the worst thing you could possibly do, which was Google it. And just like if you Google WebMD when you have a headache, you just get the worst results. And I heard horror stories of people being discriminated against on all levels of the transaction. I heard horror stories from renters to buyers to listers, and it was just horrifying. And I didn't know what to do. And so I did what was probably the least healthy choice, which was I kept my mouth shut and I didn't tell anybody anything. And I just kind of did that whole, ignorance is bliss. And it technically worked out. We bought the house. Nobody discriminated against me. But I didn't let my realtor know the entire transaction. And I didn't talk to anyone about it. And I could have easily had the conversation at the beginning, let them know, and hoped that she would be an advocate for me, let me know my rights, protect me. And I wouldn't have stressed the whole time. I would have known where I stood. And instead, I didn't do that. And I had all of this stress. So then when my wife decided that she was going to go back to work, I was going to be the stay-at-home parent, and we would have me do a side hustle of real estate, which you're all laughing probably because you know that real estate is not a side hustle. But I was hopeful back then. I had the goal of getting into real estate to hopefully help the industry and help buyers and sellers like me feel less stress. And I had the goal of teaching this class within my first year. The first time I taught it last summer was at my 14-month mark, so I just missed it. But I still got the class in there, and I had a lot of great feedback. So here we are, the second year teaching it. And please, if you have any other questions or concerns, feel free to contact me afterwards. I'm here to help the industry do a better job for LGBTQ clients. So first and foremost, what are today's goals? Well, the goals are going over the basic terms of LGBTQ, just going over, educating you on what the letters mean. It can feel overwhelming. We're going to be going over asking versus assuming, defining sex and gender, the difference between sexual orientation and gender identity, because there is a difference becoming an advocate and an ally, which I hope you want to become, and then the challenges and or questions that come with working with LGBTQ individuals. And realistically, you will be working with an individual who is LGBTQ in the future. You may or may not know it, but it might come up, and this way you are set up for success. So I know that this is through Zoom, but I still like to go over peer agreements. There is a, what I like to say, a vibe that it creates, that there's a willingness to learn on your part, and I'm here and I acknowledge that and I appreciate that, and I hope that you can assume I have the best intentions of teaching you, and I assume you have the best intentions of being here, and that's important. Also, ask questions, and you may not be able to ask them right now, but you can obviously contact me afterwards if you have questions, and we can go and grow from there. So the big first thing to get out of the way is the history. So LGBTQ individuals, there's a history that comes with our rights, and it started in 1969, which is very recent, and the riots were started by a trans black woman, and she, Marsha P. Johnson, and she did an amazing job of really starting what we now have of the rights today. And what was interesting is, you have 1969 that happened. Homosexuality is no longer a mental illness back in 1973, which is great, but it gives you perspective of how individuals were treated up to that point. But nothing happens from 1973 to 1996. Until then, just kind of crickets. And the Defense of Marriage Act was passed. So 1973, nothing happens. Cool. 1996, the conversation started again, and boom, it's a huge loss. Basically, Defense of Marriage Act says marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's how it is. And that was a huge hit. That was not great. And then 2004, so almost 20 years later, 10 years later, the first state legalizes marriage equality. And that's a little bit of a step in the right area. And then in 2009, Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Hate Crime Prevention Act is put into law. Now, Matthew Shepard was brutally murdered. It was a terrible, terrible hate crime. And so this was a step in the right direction of protecting individuals like me. In 2013, the Supreme Court strikes down the Defense of Marriage Act. So some time passed where LGBT individuals were just, stuck. 2015, marriage equality finally prevails across the country, and yet 2 years later, in the whole state or in the whole country, 50% of LGBTQ Americans live in states that allow discrimination based off sexual orientation or gender identity. That's a big portion of our citizens. And then in 2019, we had a huge loss. The administration bans transgender individuals from serving in the military. Now, at the time, trans individuals were already serving, so that was a big hit to them. And it banned people like me from joining. 2020, we were removed for having protection with discrimination in healthcare. So if you're at a hospital and a doctor does not want to do surgery on you, or the ER nurse finds that it's against her or his belief to help you because you're trans, they're allowed to now be legally protected. It was a huge hit, especially for someone who, let's say, is black, trans woman who is openly, queer. They're going to have a really hard time. We're also going to go over later on in this class of the struggles that specifically are attached for trans women. Now, in 2020, again, so a lot happened this year, the Supreme Court ruled that jobs cannot discriminate towards LGBT individuals. And that was a huge win, except for there's a lot of states where you can still fire for something as small as you're a minute late or 30 seconds late, or you put the plates in the wrong area. So there's still ability to discriminate. It's just a little bit more difficult. So it was a win, but still room to grow. So then we have the terms, LGBTQ, LGBTQ+, LGBT is how you're going to see it in a lot of different ways. And I know a lot of people joke about the LGBT alphabet or the queer alphabet or however you want to say it. I do want to let you know I wouldn't say it's the kindest thing to joke about all the letters. And I'll let you know it's because each one of those letters represents a person. And those individuals, whether they're lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning individual, there's additional letters like LGBTQ, A, P. Those all have to do with experiences and identities that somebody has, and they're valid. And we'll go over the other letters in a little bit. So the next one is sex and gender. So sex is biological or physical characteristics associated with reproductive organs at birth, typically categorized as male or female, and intersex. So intersex refers to people who are born with a mixture of both male and female or ambiguous genitalia. And the reason I bring them up is because they are more predominant in our society than we are made aware of. And what they experience is super, super difficult. And what happens basically is the doctor decides, you know, if they're going to go with the male productive organ or the female productive organ. They make that call when the child's born. And so that's a 50-50 shot of getting it wrong or getting it right. So you have somebody who the doctor made the wrong choice, and they have to later in life transition back to what they were originally given, or they don't transition, and they have to deal with the therapy that comes with that. And there's a lot of struggles. And so I'm always wanting to bring awareness to intersex because I think it's a valid thing that we need to talk about in our society. Gender identity, the internal sense that people have that they are a man, woman, or some variation of these. So sex is a literal physical identifier. Gender identity, and we'll go over cis versus trans, but most people watching this are going to be cisgender. They're the consistent with what they were given at birth. And your gender identity and your sex match. And that's not always the case for everybody. So also the ways in which we manifest masculinity or femininity, our speech, our behavior, movement, clothing, etc., those all identify and go with the gender identity. Sex and gender identity are not always congruent for every person. You can have somebody who technically appears what we as society would say female or feminine, and they go by he, him. They have male pronouns, male names. They don't want to do hormones to change their body, but they identify and know themselves to be a man. And what I always tell people is it's not your job to debate with them what they are or aren't. They know, leave it be. So if they tell you that they are, you know, you see them as a female or whatever it may be, but they say their name is Roger and they go by he, him, you call them Roger and you call him he, him. And if pronouns are too difficult for you to go with because you see a female, just say their name. Just say Roger, they, them, but don't debate. They know, and they may not want to go through the hormones, or they might not be able to go through the hormones or have the surgeries, and that's their business, not yours. So it's super important to remember that. So kind of what I brought up a little bit in the last slide was transgender versus cisgender. So I'm transgender. It's having a gender identity or an expression that's different from biological sex or physical anatomy. Transgender is a broad term and can include non-binary individuals, intersex individuals, and etc. Being transgender is not a reflection of sexual orientation, and we'll go over that. Transgender individuals could be straight, gay, lesbian, or bisexual. So I am technically in the queer family. I'm under the umbrella because I'm the T in LGBT. But a lot of times people just assume that because LGBT, it's all having to do with sexuality, who you're attracted to. I love my wife. I appear as a straight white man. That's who I am. But I'm still in the queer family because I'm transgender. Cisgender is having a gender identity or expression that is congruent with the biological sex or physical anatomy. So you could have a lesbian or a bi or a gay person who is cisgender. They did not transition. And this is where it kind of can feel complicated. So you can have a trans person who's LGB, or you could have a cis person who's LGB. So there's a lot of overlap. And that's where it's important to just be patient with yourself, be kind with yourself, and just try to slowly learn. Watch this part over a few times to try to understand that a lesbian person or a bi person or a gay person could be trans or could not. There's two differences. So sexual orientation is the type of sexual, romantic, and or physical attraction someone feels towards someone, often labeled based off their gender identity of the person and who they are attracted to. Okay, so I am a straight white male. That's who I am. I like women. That's where the straight part comes in. Now, I transitioned. So I'm a man. That's who I am. If I liked men, I would be a trans gay man. If I was a woman and I liked women, I'd be a lesbian. If I was a trans woman who liked women, I'd be a lesbian. If I was a trans woman who liked men, I'd be a straight trans woman. So you just have to understand that I'm just like a normal dude, and I like women. I'm a straight guy. But all that's different is you add the word trans. It does not change my sexual orientation. Again, I know it's confusing, so you just got to be patient with yourself. Basically, think of a trans individual and a cis individual as the same when it comes with sexual orientation. Lesbian, gay, pansexual is person who is attracted to any and all people. Bisexual, they're attracted to a male or female. There's a lot of discrimination even within the LGBT community because people will say, well, I'm a bisexual, I like women. And they'll say, oh, do you like trans women? And they'll say, no, I'm not interested in trans women. Or yeah, I'm a gay man, but I don't like trans men. And there is this kind of unspoken, sometimes spoken discrimination that can happen towards trans individuals where they don't know where they stand with other queer individuals. And it can be a place of stress, anxiety. And so you want to have compassion when you're talking to somebody because they don't know where you stand in it. They don't know if they're going to be discriminated against by their own community, let alone by you as a realtor or as a fellow citizen. So it's always important to be sensitive and kind. So there's areas impacted by LGBT individuals, whether it's family relationships, coming out, employment is something that can be a really difficult part. LGBT individuals have a very high rate of unemployment, of homelessness, and a huge part is because when they come out, they lose their job, and if they lose their job, they normally lose their home. You also have discrimination based off of peer and social relationships. I can't count the amount of times when I came out, people said, you know, I'm super happy for you. I even always thought you were a dude, but I just can't call you James. I'm going to call you your old name. And that always confused me. You know, they'll be able to say, yeah, you're super masculine, you're definitely a dude, but I just can't respect you all the way through. You know, and that can be really difficult. I had a lot of what I would have called friends say that. I lost a lot of so-called friends because of that. And so it's important that if someone tells you they're going to be transitioning and they go by this certain name, respect that. You know, people change names all the time. We just don't think of it. You know, when your friend gets married and he or she changes their last name to their spouse's last name, they just change their name. And we as a society just go with it. That's normal for them to change the last name. We adapt. That's what's happening with transitioning. We're changing our name and we're asking you to adapt. Nicknames, you're changing the person's name, you adapt with it. Same with transitioning. Education, housing, community involvement and support, that can be in good and bad ways. You know, Vancouver actually has quite a bit of opportunities for community involvement. The hard part is finding it. A lot of times they're very small community nonprofits that you can't find just by Googling it. And so a lot of times people feel alone and don't know that there are outlets for them to be safe. Then just going off of being safe, you have personal safety. You have, you know, a high rate of domestic violence and violence by significant others towards LGBT, specifically trans individuals. And just recently, they have taken away the ability to call this law was in place that protected people for hurting or killing a trans individual who didn't out themselves right away. And when they were dating, if they were shocked by that and they acted out of hate, they were allowed to get off of the crime. And just recently were trans individuals protected from that. And so there is personal safety. There's fear. It's real. It's valid. And so when we are taking people into homes to tour, or we are taking them to tour land that is far away, I'm going to be really honest and say they're probably terrified to be alone with you. They're terrified that you could hurt them, or the people who own the property or the house could hurt them. So it is important to discuss not only that you're an advocate and ally, if they've outed themselves to you, if they have not outed themselves, just in general, I always say I'm a safe person and I'm here to be an advocate and ally for you as my client. And if they want to out themselves, great. If they don't, there's no need to talk about it except for just say to all my clients that I'm here to make sure their safety is my number one concern. So it's always important that we vocalize who we are consistently, not only specifically to minorities. It's important to just create that habit in general. Obviously, having access to medical care, transitioning hormones, that's hard for trans individuals, and it's important that we represent whatever we can in our small degree, because these people are being impacted by their queerness across the board. So here we are as individuals, we're interacting with somebody and we don't know maybe what name they go by or what pronoun. So ask, don't assume. Assuming can lead to some painful, embarrassing moments and even possibly the loss of a client. So it's always best to ask. And what I say is, instead of asking, tell. So my name's James. I go by he, him. What was your name again? Rebecca. Oh, awesome, Rebecca. What pronouns do you prefer? She, her. Perfect. And don't do this with people who just you're not sure. Create the habit all the time. And I'm guilty of not always doing it. I do my best. I try. But it's important that if you create that habit, it saves you from a very embarrassing moment. Now, let's say you either forget to ask, so you assume, or they told you and you still mess up. Don't make the apology about you. Apologize quickly, efficiently, and move on. Okay, so Rebecca, it's Roger actually, James. Oh my gosh, Roger, I'm so sorry. Roger, anyways, so this house that I was showing you, or I say, hey Roger, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, that's right. So she said, and Roger's like, actually I go by he. You're right, I'm so sorry. Anyways, so he, him, whatever it may be, move on. Simple, clean, apologetic, humble. You're not making it about you. You don't say, oh my gosh, I'm the worst. I'm so sorry. And you start making it about you that the trans individual feels like they need to make you feel better about you messing up for them. No, it's fine. Calm down. You're fine. You didn't upset me. It's this weird thing that people do that somehow it's almost like they're looking for validation that I'm not hurt, that I'm not upset. And I don't understand it because it actually makes the moment way more awkward and more drawn out. So just quick, efficient, move on. Don't make it a big deal. And, just make it simple. So LGBTQ plus and real estate. So 26 states do not prohibit housing discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And Washington and Oregon do. That's awesome. But there's 26 other states. So you have people who are moving from one of those states that feel high anxiety. They don't know that they're protected in our state. They don't know that there's laws in place. And so they're going to be either very, very hush-hush with you. They're not going to tell you that they've transitioned, or they're not going to tell you that they're queer or LGBT. And you're going to maybe find things out as the transaction goes along, or you're not going to find out until the last minute. Or they tell you and they're very protected. So it's important that you have to understand not only that someone's coming to you for a house, but you have to understand where they're coming from. And really, that's what I'm wanting this whole class to be about, is this is not just about you or the client in the house. This is about the journey that the client has had their entire life and recently what they're experiencing as they come to you. And we need to remember that. Also, as realtors, we just need to remember that in general. It's super important to remember everybody has a journey when they're coming to us. The national LGBT home ownership rate is 49%, 16% below the overall national home ownership rate of 65%. And a large part of that is because people fear discrimination. As many as 13% of LGBT home buyers have claimed to be victims of discrimination, according to Freddie Mac. So that's a lot. I think that's a lot. I think that's 13% more than it should be. And 72% of all LGBT renters polled by Freddie Mac in a survey of 85% gay men and women want to be homeowners. Okay, so we have this huge amount of people who want to be homeowners. They become homeowners and they're either discriminated against and they share those stories. So then people are like, nope, I'm good. Or there's just this almost 50% fear that they're going to be discriminated against. And so it's important that we have that at the top of our mind throughout the whole transaction, how to protect them, how to basically honor them. And by doing that, we create a dream team. From start to finish, we create a team of people who are there to protect them and make sure that the deal is not only efficient and thorough, just like we want it with every transaction, but that our clients are protected and that there's no windows for discrimination. So how do you do that? How do you create a dream team? Well, you're doing it right now. You're creating your own dream team within yourself first, which is super important. The next step starts with talking with your broker, making sure your office is a safe place for them, transaction coordinator, fellow realtors, fellow agents, and you just create a safe environment in your office, start to finish. Right there, that's important. The next step is talking with your title company, your lender, anyone and everyone that could possibly be coming in contact with your client. Not everyone needs to know. So that is super important. Just because you have a trans client or an openly very queer client, everybody does not need to know. You have to make the judgment call, but I will say really honestly, it's a conversation the client needs to have with their lender, possibly, when it comes to transitioning. LGBT or LGB, it does not normally need to come up that they're queer. They just tell them that it's their spouse or their partner, and the lender can take it from there. Transitioning, as a transgender person, you might have multiple names on the alias list, and so the lender might find that, or title might pull that. And those are the times where it comes up, and if you get permission from your client, let's say they out themselves to you, and they say, I do want to let you know I'm trans. I don't know what that means for this transaction. You can quickly say, honestly, nothing. Don't even worry about it. I'll make sure you're protected at all, interviews or tours. We'll make sure you don't have to worry about any type of stress. And it may or may not come up with the lender when they pull your social, might come up with title. And if it does, I'll deal with it. You're good. Bam, simple. You can also go into asking, well, how far into the transition have you gone? Have you changed your name on your ID, on your birth certificate? Is the title that you had on your previous house, has that been switched? Because if you've switched your name, your old name may still be on the record, and I just want to make sure you're aware you might see that throughout the transition, and I don't want that to be a trigger for you. That sentence is going to, one, show them that you're an ally for sure. You know what you're talking about. It's going to show them that you're well prepared to handle their situation and that they don't have anything to stress. And it's also going to show them that they may see their dead name, and that can be a really big trigger. And the reason we say dead name is because that was a person that existed, and that person no longer exists. I'm a new person. When I fully transitioned into James, I've always been James my whole life. Nobody else knew it, though. And that's always what I say, is I've always been a dude. Just some people were late to the party and figuring it out. And so I don't always want to see my old name. It's a reminder of some struggles I went through, some painful situations. And so that name can be a trigger for me. And so if you let your clients know, hey, that's your old name, your dead name, whatever you prefer, is going to be there on some of the paperwork when we sign at closing. I just want to let you know so you're not surprised or triggered by it, and I'll do my best to prep you ahead of time. You let the title agent know if they need to. You let the lender know. And then you also ask, do you prefer spouse, partner, husband, wife? What is your best? And again, create these habits with everybody, and then you don't have to worry about it. So you have all of the things that we've gone over. Avoiding outing them. Not everybody needs to know. Letting them know that you'll be talking, going over the sales process. All of these things, you will build the habit, and then it won't be as much of a stressor because it's going to stress you out. It even stresses me out when I have a trans client because I want to make sure I'm doing everything I can to protect them because I know that anxiety. So this is going to take time, but just be patient with yourself. Take some notes and go over them, right before your meeting with your client so that you're well prepared. So pronouns: he, him; she, her; he, they; them; she, them; sie, zai, or only name. There's all sorts of pronouns out there. And I have yet to interact with someone who is Z, Zi, but people exist with those pronouns. And a lot of times what they're wanting to establish is that they aren't one, they're not he or her, and they want to have a pronoun. They don't want to just be they, them, but they don't know what to go by. And so Zi was created. And so it's important to respect people. A lot of times people say like, well, why do people even have to have they or them? And the reason for it is because they are gender neutral. So they don't identify specifically with female, or they don't identify specifically with male, and they're either one of two things. They're trying to find out what they identify with, and they them helps, that gender neutral label helps, or they are genuinely just a gender neutral person. And guess what? That's okay. It doesn't hurt you. It's not going to affect you. It might be a minor inconvenience having to remember to use they, them, but I'm going to tell you, more often than not, what it's going to do is just make you realize how often we as a society rely on pronouns and the labels of male or female. And I got to be honest, we rely a lot on it. And it hurts people who are trying to figure out where they stand or if they are a gender neutral person. We in the U.S. are very dependent on two labels, male or female. There are many cultures where a third gender, gender neutral or a third gender is praised. It's a special honor to have that. And so we have to understand that it is uncomfortable for us, but there are a lot of societies where this is completely normal. It's been happening for hundreds of years, and we're just having to adapt our society to understand it a little bit better. So prep your team to only use their name. If they can't do they, them, just constantly Roger, or Rebecca, whatever it may be. And maybe Rebecca hasn't had the chance to become Roger because they've been saving all of their money for their down payment. They haven't been able to afford a name change or an ID change. And so on all of the title, all the paperwork, on the purchase and sale agreement, it's going to say Rebecca. But Rebecca really wants to go by Roger. That's important for you to notate that. So every time before you call Roger, you close your eyes, you go, okay, calling Roger, do that. Set up a pattern so that you do your best to honor Roger's transition and understand that there's a reason why Rebecca's written on everything. That doesn't mean that they want to go by Rebecca. They just might not have had the ability to transition. Transitioning is very expensive. It can be, everything from getting your name changed on your ID, paying the court to switch your name, having to pay for paperwork, maybe, reordering a degree or a master's degree that was in the other name, paying for your birth certificate to be switched. Those are all just the starters. That doesn't include the surgeries or the hormones. And, for a trans man, you go on hormones. I'll be on hormones every week. On Sunday, I do the shot in my leg, and I'll be doing that every week for the rest of my life. And I have done that for about 5 years, and that's normal to me. For trans women, it's so much more. For me, I get a beard, lost my hair, and my voice dropped, and here I am. Society sees me as the man that I've always seen myself to be. For trans women, you have surgeries from reshaping their nose, their jaw, their chin, their eyebrows, their hips, anything and everything. There's at least 10 different surgeries that can help them better fit into society. And it's completely up to them if they want to. They don't have to, but a lot of times people can't afford to do that. And so you see someone who may be more masculine presenting that says, no, I'm she, her, and I'm Rebecca, and you want to argue with that. That's not your place to argue because you don't know their journey. Either one, they love their body the way it is, it's beautiful the way it is, or they can't afford to transition and they really want to. But either way, they want to present as Rebecca and as she, her, and it's our job to honor that and understand that's their experience. That's what they're going through. So what's one way that you can be a little bit more of an advocate and just kind of a subtle note, a subtle show that how to help LGBT clients? Well, adding pronouns, adding he, him, or she, her, or they, them to your email signature, your business card. It's a subtle thing, but man, does it help. Because as a trans person, now for me, I don't need to do he, him. I present as he, him. I have never in the last 4 years had my pronouns messed up. Everybody says he, him. But I add he, him so that people know I have an idea of pronouns. I kind of know the game when it comes to pronouns. It's just a subtle give. Now, a lot of people say, well, should it just be trans people? And I always say, no, the more the merrier, because the more we normalize using pronouns that cis people, and if we go back to the beginning, cis means you're consistent with what you were born. If we have cisgendered people doing it, then it normalizes it so that when a trans person does it, it's not outing them. Because for most people, they go, well, why does James have he, him? Is there something about him we should know about? Or why does Rebecca have her, he, or her, or she, or whatever it may be? And is there something we should know about? And they start to research, maybe they are trans or maybe they're queer, and then all of a sudden they're outed. If we can just normalize it, we're cisgender people, straight people, pronouns are just a normal part of society, then it makes it a little bit easier for transgender individuals. So how do you become an advocate? How do you become an ally? Well, first, being willing to stand up for your possible clients. Discrimination's real. Having that ability to say, I know the rules, I know the laws, I know where my client can and cannot be discriminated against, and that's first and foremost going to be the most important thing to do, just from a legal standpoint. But two, when you come off as knowledgeable as a literal advocate and ally, you make them feel this peace of mind, because we all know buying a house is already one of the biggest stressors somebody goes through in their life. And you add somebody with a disability or some minority check mark, and they're going to feel so much more anxiety already. So if we can say, hey, I know the law, I know that you're protected, you're good. I've got a team that's here to make sure that you're set. That makes it just feel a little bit easier, a little bit more at ease in an already stressful experience. You do not have to understand what it's like to be a trans person. I'm not asking you to try to step in my shoes and know what I go through. No, what I'm just saying is be empathetic. It's important that we understand there are a lot of different stories, whether it be the world or United States or Vancouver. And every type of experience we have is valid. That's our story. That's our journey. And when you are trying to do something like buy a house and you have all of these stressors from your past, if you as a realtor can say, I don't understand necessarily, right? I can't say I know your experience, but I can understand what you're going through. I know the history, or I know the stories. You have this sense of allyship, this friendship that creates a bond where they're going to trust you. And that's priceless. That's priceless, and it helps you as a business person. It builds referrals. It builds a reputation of being a business owner that people want to work with, and that's important. That's crucial. So let's say you want to become an ally and you don't really know where to start besides learning all the laws and everything. You don't know how to interact with them, and an LGBT person, specifically a trans person, in person. Well, what can you do? Well, practice pronouns. So the best way to practice pronouns, normally if we were in a class, is I'd say turn to the person next to you and say, hi, my name is James, and I go by he, him pronouns. So if you can't do that, you can practice it silently right now. I would say practice it over and over and over until it doesn't feel awkward, and it becomes your normal way of introducing yourself. James, he, him, it's a pleasure to meet you. What was your name? Cool. What were your pronouns? Awesome. I will do my best to remember that. And you just create a normal habit. So that is the main kind of class, going over everything. Here's my phone number if you have any questions that you weren't able to ask in class today. And what I always like to do is end with a little bit of a story. So When I started with real estate, I got into it because of my experience as a trans person. And I was super excited. I was super excited to help the industry, help my fellow friends who are LGBTQ. And one of the first things I was told when I got into real estate is, don't forget, you can't be political anymore. Don't post your political stuff, James. I know you like posting on Facebook about your rights and stuff, but if you want to succeed in this industry, you can't post political stuff. You're going to have to mute your political voice. And I did. I did for about 2 years. And like I said, I've been in this for 2 years. So just recently have I found my voice again. And the reason it just recently happened is because of everything we're experiencing in this climate right now. And I realized that the one thing I have that's mine is my voice. And if I'm not using it, then no one else is going to speak up for me. It's my job to use my voice. And honestly, my rights are political, but they're my rights. And they're my friends' rights. And they're possibly my kids' rights and my wife's rights. And so my rights are political, but they're political unnecessarily. I'm just trying to exist. Most LGBTQ individuals are just trying to exist. They just want to buy a house. They just want a safe place to live. They want a safe place to, have to be in isolation, or they want a safe place to raise their kids or start a family or commute to work. And that's what our job is to help them have a safe place. So my rights have become political. And when I got into this job, I was so sad because I was so excited at first to help the industry. And then I realized I can't talk about it to anybody. And so if I, as a realtor, don't always know how to talk about it, imagine how your client feels. And that's why we're here today, is I wanted to find a way to help the industry normalize what is normally a political conversation and help you realize it's not that political. It's just normal people trying to exist in our society, in our in our community, and just find a safe place to live. So I hope that I've helped you better understand the LGBTQ terms, how to use pronouns, and how people are existing as LGBT individuals. If you have any kind of questions or concerns, please reach out. And definitely here to teach, here to learn if you have any concerns. And here's to next time.